everybody, this is Caitlyn from Caitlynthings. Thanks for dropping by. It's a pleasure to see you. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're one of my handful of returning subscribers, thank you for coming back. I super appreciate you. Welcome back. So I am actually in Wyoming right now. I am visiting my mom. It was like 3 years since I've seen her, and between we had deaths in the family, we had people moving cross country, myself included, during one of those years, and things just were so crazy for so long that this was way overdue, and I'm super happy to be here and to have the opportunity to visit with my mother and to help her with all of the yard work and such. Between one thing and another, there's been some health issues. There's been, she works for the school district and they just got out of school. So anybody that works with a school system, I don't have to tell you how grueling the end of spring can be for finals and for graduations and all of the business that is surrounded there. So the first project on our docket is going to be resetting all of her flower pots. I caught the gardening bug from my mother, and she grew up doing all kinds of different gardening and things like that. I come by the sickness, honestly, the gardening bug. I believe I even had like a great-great-great-grandfather that was a gardener in the palace at Lake Balaton in Hungary. So there is a long lineage of plant lovers that I come from, and it's pretty interesting stuff how that follows over generations and never really goes away. So we're going to reset her pots. I have flower beds that I need to clean out. We have lilacs to prune. We've gotten so much rain here in Wyoming. When I was going to high school out here, this is just a tiny little town in north central Wyoming, probably nobody's ever heard of. I think the total population is probably 15 or 1800. 1800 is probably generous. It was always dry and crispy for the most part. You had a short period in spring where things were green as the snow, the runoff from the mountains would bring more water down into the basins, but they get so much rain here now. It's wild coming back here, and things are green in a way that they never were when I lived here. So it's really interesting how that kind of stuff can change over time. And as gardeners, we kind of have to be able to adapt to that. And I know a lot of people have talked about how their climates are really changing. It's really unusual. Sorry, I'm watching this bunny rabbit that lives. He's too far away. I don't think I could get a good shot of him for you. Maybe he lives in this yard and he's pretty not bothered by the fact that humans are around, so maybe I'll get you some footage of him later. I thought he was chewing on a garden hose and I was gonna have to do something drastic. Anyway, so another thing on our list is the lawn already needs to be mowed again because they've gotten so much rain. It's just been wild how much water is going on in north central Wyoming. And even my brother lives down in Fort Collins, and they are significantly greener than they used to be. So, okay, so what did I say? We're gonna do pots, we're gonna do pruning of lilacs, we're gonna clean out flower beds and mow lawns. So that's 4 major chores, and I mean, there's painting, there's some things that we would like to do around the house and the garage behind me to get things ready so that when she is ready to pull the trigger and retire and potentially put her property up for sale, then we're just a little closer to being ready for that when the time arrives. But I wanted to, I'm shooting in front of this location for a very specific reason. This flower bed back here, she probably would be mortified. Mom, I'm sorry. I promise nobody will judge you. You are a busy woman doing a lot of different things. This flower bed was the first place that I ever really got to do outdoor gardening. I had a teacher in high school that was generous enough to pull strings and figure out what he needed to do so that I could do independent study botany courses. And because botany is not something that's typically, especially in a small school of like 150 students total, all 4 grades, that kind of stuff is not available on the high school level. And so he went out and ordered me college level textbooks for horticulture and botany, and he let me use all of the resources in his chemistry classroom and just really made that subject available to me in a way that let me learn a lot, and it was a lot of fun. So Mr. Cooper, if you ever see this, probably not. I don't think I've talked to him in years, but on the off chance that he does see this, you deserve a big fat thank you for that. I still, years later, I'm in my mid-30s, and I still remember that and greatly appreciate it. So it's a mess right now just because between all of the busyness of school, and she caught a bug and was sick for a while when things really started to jump up because of the rain. So you can see it's full of grass. There are some irises, there are chives, there are this pink flower back here is one of my mom's favorite. I think they're called dianthus, if I remember correctly. They're not something I've done a whole lot with in the past. And these big right here, I planted those back when I was in high school doing those botany courses, and I can't remember if, I think they're salvia. They're a form of salvia that sends up the big purple spears. And then I'll turn you a little bit. If you have rudbeckia that survives for years, this is what it turns into. When I put this in here, it was like a 10-inch bush that had yellow flowers that were really pretty. They're sort of almost look like a yellow daisy, but they have gotten massive. If I stand next to this, let me see if I can get my tripod to sit stable on this ground. So you can see how huge these are. So I need to clean out this flower bed. There is another flower bed around the front of the house, and I'll do my best to take some before and afters, if for no other reason. I know there's not that many people that watch these and are interested, but it'll make me feel really good to see the before and afters. So in general, that is the plan for the next week to 2 weeks. I'm just gonna do the best I can to get as much done as I can, and I will do my best to take you guys along with me. So I'm gonna go put my hair in a messy bun because I'm not one of those cool garden girls that can go garden with her hair long and down and not look like a sweaty lunatic afterwards. And I'll see you guys in a bit. So I said we're gonna do pots first. She doesn't really have planters. Most of what she has are larger flower pots. And so we're resetting those, and she struggles with some of the heavy lifting, and I mean, I don't have great muscles either, but I am a little more able to do that than she is at the present moment. And so most of these pots have potting mix and soil in them that is several years old, some probably more than that. And she just, like most people, she buys some new potting mix and puts it into some pots here and there every year. But if you are growing in containers, it is really important to be cognizant of the nutrition in your soil because it is so limited. Sorry, I'm easily distracted. The neighbors are doing things. Squirrel. So there are many, many ways that you can do this. It's definitely one of those there is more than one way to skin a cat kind of deals, and there's probably wrong ways, but I think that it's very rare that people are going to go too badly wrong. In this instance, I'm only going to be altering the potting mix with water and with plant food, but in the ideal situation, I really like to mix in some plant food as well as some good compost, and that can come from your own compost pile, or it can be bagged compost, or if you are one of those people with the resources to do it, it can just come in. You can order it in big loads by the truckful or by the, what do they do, cubic yards, I think. When you order rocks or soil or compost, you can buy it by the cubic yard. I want to say people have told me that 2 to 3 cubic yards usually fits in the bed of a pickup truck, depending on the size of your pickup truck. But in this setting, all we have is the older, for the most part, we have aged potting mix, And she's got plant food in the garage that I pulled out, and because this is such an arid desert environment, pots go hydrophobic really, really quickly, and she hasn't been able to do a lot with these pots since, I want to say it was since last fall, and their fall hit, they didn't even really have that much of a fall. Winter came early, it got cold really fast, and then it never came back up. So the soil in these pots is crumbly and dusty, and when that is the case, it makes it really hard for the bacteria and the fungus and the good things in the soil that help your plants grow to thrive. It makes it impossible. It's an inhospitable environment for life, not just for plants, but for all of the things in the soil that are alive that support them. So the first thing that I did when I saw how dry it was I got out the wheelbarrow and I started just pouring pitchers full of water into the soil. I dumped the pots out, I watered it really good, I mixed it up, I watered it again and again and again. You would not believe how many pitchers of water the dry, dusty soil did finally soak up, but it took time because when soil becomes hydrophobic like that, it actually repels water. So it has to sit and soak for a while before it can actually start to absorb that water again and put plant food in with it. And you'll see all of this in the video. I might do some voiceover for that if I can get my ducks in a row for it. But you can follow the instructions on the package. I am not a very exact kind of person, so I read the instructions and then I'm just kind of eyeballing my way through it, trying to make good judgment calls in terms of the amount of fertilizer versus the volume of soil versus what I have a general idea of what I'm putting in that pot. So always read your instructions, and if you're not sure, opt to under fertilize rather than over fertilize. I've said this in other videos and I will say it 100 million times in every video going forward if I have to make sure that people don't make this mistake, because it's so discouraging, especially for a new gardener, when they do all this work and then they fertilize everything and then it dies because you burned it with your fertilizer. Fertilizer, it is always better to under fertilize and just watch what happens, and then in a week or 2 or even 3, just watch how it grows, and if it looks like it maybe needs a little bit more of something, then you can give it another shot of fertilizer. But if you overdo the fertilizer, it can be really difficult to come back from. Sometimes it's impossible. Your plants will get orange or yellow or just go ahead and wilt and die altogether, just because too much of a good thing can sometimes be enough to kill you, and that's true of humans and plants and every other living thing on planet Earth, I think. So all good things in moderation. So I'm going to go put my hair in a messy bun and we're gonna get to work. And I'm hearing thunder and I really hope it doesn't start raining again because I have a lot I want to get done. I have to kind of walk the other direction like I'm not watching him. This little bunny has dug a hole in the gravel under my mom's car because he likes to use it as a cool place to chill under one of the back tires. But he's very much not bothered by much. He's out here all the time in the yard with us. Usually rabbits are a little more skittish, but not this guy. What do you think, buddy? You got scritches? Oh, I got too close. I was offensive. I'm sorry. Look at those ears. He's listening. Okay, so I had poured this dirt in one solid, very dried out chunk out from this pot. And you can see it had good drainage and everything in it, but over time plants get a little root bound and fill that pot pretty tight, so even if you weren't dealing with hydrophobic soil like this, you can see how it crumbles apart just in super dry, dusty chunks. It is good even if you're living in an environment plant that gets plenty of humidity and doesn't dry out this badly, to reset your pots when you can. I don't know anybody that has the time to do it every single season reliably, but I would say if you planted them consistently once a year would be ideal. Here you can see this was a pellet that somebody had started seeds in, and then whatever that plant was got put in that pot. This right here is a very good example of why I don't recommend using those peat caps, because they're sold in the seed starting section of all of the big box stores and promoted and recommended, but they really don't break apart as well. I wouldn't worry about things like bigger tomato plants and things that really have a lot of muscle to bust out of a peat cap once they're big enough that they need to. But I think most things that are less mighty than a tomato plant in terms of root power are going to have a little bit more of a struggle to not have uncomfortable restriction in that peat cap. And you can see it didn't disintegrate. That it's probably been in there for a couple years and it still was very much in one piece. So we're just pouring pitcher after pitcher of water in here as I am working my way through it. And periodically, because I'm going through so much of it at once, I went ahead and tried to empty out several pots at a time so that I could recondition the soil, and also have empty pots that I could then turn around and refill so that they would be ready to go. A lot of people will put stones. You can see in this one there was gravel in the bottom, and that helps with drainage. So while it is a little bit of a pesky situation when you have to dump everything out like this, I think it is still worth doing. If you can use big gravel, that is better for drainage and also makes your life easier when it comes to not mixing tons of little rocks in with your soil. If you're just growing flowers and stuff, it probably wouldn't matter, but I know there's some of my larger pots like this. I also like to grow radishes and carrots and things like that, and you definitely don't want lots of stones in your soil that they have to grow around when it comes to anything that's growing under the soil surface like that. So these are good size rocks for this, and they just came out of my mom's driveway. I do pick the rocks out where I can, even the ones that do fall further down into the soil as I work. But you know, if you miss a few, it's not the end of the world. Life will go on. Alright, so now that that super fun chore is done, it's time to mix in the plant food, and I am not dedicated to any one brand or any one variety necessarily. This Job's is a decent brand and it's widely available. This is just happened to be what my mom had in the garage at the time, and it's a good all-around plants. And since mostly what we're doing is flowers, and this was something that was a little more balanced to focus on blooms, I figured it would be not a bad choice. But ultimately, it would be good for most things, I think. A lot of the things that we like to grow in a garden for food purposes, it's all flowering plants because that's how they reproduce on one level or another. So I just sprinkle it evenly over the top. Like I said before, loosely based on the instructions in terms of volume, but I don't know for sure. I didn't measure out all of the soil that I have in here. So while I was looking at the instructions and trying to keep them in mind, it was also a little bit of like the meme says, where you just keep sprinkling until the spirits tell you that is enough, child. And that's sort of how I live my life. And most of the time, I'd say at least 95% of the time, that works for me, and that's an acceptable percentage. The the rest is education. And more water, and more water, and more water. I probably would have done better just to reel the big long hose in and just fill this wheelbarrow with water straight out of the hose. But I was really close to a faucet on the side of the house, so it was not a hardship to just fill that bucket up every time I was ready for more. And that really let me control how much water I was introducing at a time and just work it bit by bit into the soil. And I broke apart root clumps. I didn't take out any root clumps unless they were really, really hard and woody and something that's going to take probably a good 5 years or more to break down. Those went into a compost pile. But those smaller clumps of roots, they will disintegrate, and the nutrients that are inside them will be returned back into the soil and become available for future plants. And so it's a good thing to leave that stuff in your soil when you can. So I've got rocks and some broken pottery that have just been put in the bottom of this pot, like I said before, for drainage reasons. And then I just fill the pot up, and you want to fill it probably a little more full than ideally you want it, because the dirt will sink down after the first couple times you water it and the plants settle in. So I tried to make sure that I put enough in the first go round that nobody has to come back through and put more dirt in the pot around plants later. Your judgment on things like that will get better the more that you do it. My mom has several of these square planters pots, and I really think that I'm normally not into things with sharp corners like that, but they are very attractive as shapes go for putting around certain parts of your yard. So you can see there is mulch in the bottom of this square planter. I would not recommend putting mulch in the bottom if you are looking to save some money and you don't have enough soil to be filling all the pots completely full of just potting mix. I would recommend putting leaf litter and grass clippings and things like that in the bottom. They break down much quicker, and the problem with the wood chips is that, if I understand it, and please feel free to correct me in the comments if I am under false impressions here in my understanding, but as I understand it, wood mulch, pieces of wood, as they are disintegrating or as they are starting to break down, before they are broken down, they pull nitrogen in from the soil and they store it. And it's just kind of a fact of their decomposition process. In the early part of it, they suck in nitrogen. And as a result, that nitrogen is now no longer available for your plants. And plants need nitrogen, especially for things like growing foliage, new leaves and things like that. If you're wanting a plant to really bush out, you want to feed it something with a decent amount of nitrogen. And manure fertilizers are major nitrogen sources. But anyway, when the wood chips eventually completely break down, then they release lots of nitrogen, and that is a great thing for your soil, but it takes years to happen. So in a small format like this especially, you don't really want wood chips to be a factor in your soil if you can help it. A lot of what was in the bottom of these pots, it's several years old now. It's fairly well mixed in. I am not even as delusional as I often can be. I'm not going to try to pull wood chips out of soil it's already mixed in. So save yourself the headache and just, in the future, we just make more informed decisions. This was something that she and I both learned about only in the last couple years. I can't tell you with certainty what that a doubt root bound, and I'm sure they will be really, really happy to get into their new home and spread their toes out a little bit. And I put the petunias and it's either a type of phlox or I don't think it's lobelia. It's something similar to phlox but smaller in the corner there. Dreams Neon Rose is what these particular petunias are called, these taller ones. It was kind of hard to get I wasn't 100% sure if I was getting that tag in focus there. So I was just sort of laying things out and trying to decide how we wanted to situate this planter, and my mom was working across the yard, and so I wanted a little bit of her feedback since these are pots that she's going to be looking at long after I've gone home. And she said she was good with it. Petunias were approved. It's hard to go wrong with petunias. And so I just worked them into corners. If you have a wave petunia, I would never recommend putting this many in quite this close, but these are not a wave petunia. They're not going to bush out the same way. So I know that I can afford the space to put 2 in each corner like this. That turned out pretty nice. So you can see here the light has gotten a little gray and the wind is starting to kick up. I was just trying to get as many pots planted as I possibly could before it started raining on me. This is German thyme. I wasn't sure if the camera was going to be able to see the faded writing on that marker or not. And it tucked in pretty easily. A lot of these were from, what is that? Oh, that's a little Dusty Miller. A lot of these were from like an FFA plant sale earlier in the spring, and these were the leave behinds. I think my mom got most of them for free because they were just things that didn't sell, and so she had tons of cabbage and thyme and some oregano. Here in Tennessee where I live, this thyme would bush out more. I would never plant them that close together, but up in Wyoming, which, I mean, it's a difference in garden zones between 4A there and 7B in Middle Tennessee. So things grow drastically differently. They stay much smaller up there. This is, I believe, lobelia. Lobelia is always a good decision in pots. Especially if you plant it like I did here, it kind of hangs out over the edge while other things bush up over it. And it always looks really nice with just about anything you put in there with it. This is mainly an herb planter. I've got thyme and parsley and a little Dusty Miller that may or may not live, and then this is oregano. And similar to what I said with the peat caps that you use for seed starting, I've seen similar problems with those peat pots. They just don't disintegrate in the ground usually the way manufacturers would like you to believe. It's not the end of the world if you put the pot in the ground. A lot of times it'll be fine, but the plant is more likely to do better if you can strip that pot off of it. They're not bad if you have everything in a big tray where you're bottom watering. If you are raising your seedlings in any other kind of situation, I would absolutely not recommend using those peat pots. As affordable as they appear to be and as useful as they appear to be, I think you're really better off with a handful of plastic pots that you will just reuse every single year. This is sweet basil, and I didn't realize at first how many plants were in this pot, but I counted and there was probably at least 10 little basil plants. And so basil regrows roots really, really easily. and I could not just plug that in there, even though I was pressed for time. I didn't have it in my heart to do that to a basil plant. So I separated them out and put 4 or 5 little basil plants in this pot. Again, if you are in a zone that has milder winters and longer, hotter summers, I would not put this many plants for basil in a pot that size, but in north central Wyoming, their growing season is very short. Their summers are not nearly as hot and humid, and so things that like hot weather like basil are just not going to bush out there the way that they will in other places. This would be a good place to talk about the expectations of how something is going to grow in different climates. Like in Tennessee, I would not put thyme in a pot like this with this many other things, but I think in Wyoming it'll do okay. Having dyed mulch like this in your potting mix really isn't a great thing. I think this was put in here mainly because she's not growing food, so that's alright. It's not gonna corrupt something that we're eating with chemicals, but it's not the healthiest thing you can include in your soil. I think she just happened to have it on hand one year and money was a little tight. So she used it to fill the bottom of some of her pots to help save some money and make the potting soil stretch. I probably would have done it too a couple years ago without thinking twice about it, but I've learned a lot in recent history about how wood disintegrates and how it affects the nutrients in your soil. I know I did just say that in terms of chemical exposure from the dyed mulch in the soil, that we weren't putting food items in these pots. These are culinary herbs that I am planting, but she had a whole bunch of them free from the remnants of the FFA sale, so she is not likely to be eating these ones. She has herbs growing in other places that she can clip from if she wants them to use in her cooking. So these are just to look pretty, and they do. These parsley and I think it's English thyme. There was some English thyme and some German thyme, and they're being put in this pot with a fuchsia flower plant. This footage through here is so goofy because I was trying to get this done as it was starting to pour on me intermittently. And in a second I think you'll see I finally gave up for the afternoon. Very frustrating. I was actually getting a lot accomplished, and the weather just, I couldn't believe how it rained every single time. Oh, it's starting to rain. Big fat raindrops. This happens just when I'm starting to really get stuff done. Does that happen to anybody else? Gosh dang it. Alright. If I can just get this pot done. I don't want my phone to get all wet. It's time. I don't mind putting herbs in with flowers. I think it looks really pretty. This is fuchsia. Okay, game called on account of rain. We'll be right back. I don't know if you can see that on the video. No, it's hailing. It's actually hailing out there. Just when I was starting to really be getting things done. But rain is good. We like rain. Oh wow. I don't know if you can see right along here. There's hail like bouncing down off the edge of the roof. Welp, so much for working on that project. Holy smokes. For the record, we checked the forecast and it was clear. This was not supposed to happen. This was not the plan. Well, it was not our plan. Obviously, Mother Nature had other ideas. That's okay. The rain is good. I don't see any more hail. You left your windows open? Oh no. Do you want to do it, or do you, I mean, my hands are filthy. I even went back out there and I started filming again, and it immediately started raining harder again. It's my fault. Mom left the windows on her car open. That's a bad day. Note to self, always close windows.